Benvenuti a tutti, faccio una breve introduzione in italiano, il resto dell'evento sarà in inglese, abbiamo qui un quartiere di ospiti che introduco brevemente in italiano. Grazie a tutti per essere qui a questo thinkshop. I'll switch to English in a couple of minutes. L'idea è di un workshop che non è un workshop, quindi è un workshop dove si pensa, non si lavora, quindi abbiamo chiamato thinkshop per cambiare un po' paradigma. È una sorta di seduta di massa di psicanalisi in cui si fa un po' di brainstorming e il pubblico può condividere e interagire con noi via Twitter, c'è un feed, l'hashtag è thinkshop, quindi qualsiasi cosa che ci mandate la vediamo lì e poi gli speaker avranno modo di replicare. A questo punto io passo in inglese e il resto dell'evento lo facciamo in inglese. So let me thank you for coming, everybody. We have here partners of iLocate. That's the first pre-kickoff workshop or thinkshop, as we like to call it. We decided to name it thinkshop because a regular workshop is something where we are supposed to work. And we are not working here, we're just thinking. So hopefully the idea today is that we get nice feedback, good feedback for our project. What we will be doing is a sort of group brainstorming with this gentleman here. I will introduce them all, and hopefully this will set the foundations of iLocate, giving us feedback on what can be useful for us, what can be not useful. Now, we are not projecting slides as in a regular workshop. We have a few slides that are just helpful for us to keep track of what we are saying, just to make sure that we are following a red thin line. But actually we know where we are starting from, but we don't know where we are ending to. So it's sort of a little bit of an experiment also for us. First of all, I would like to thank you, our host, Trentino Sviluppo. We are here in the headquarters of Trentino Sviluppo. We are, as Trilogy's as company, hosted here just next door, basically the other way. And I would like also to thank the thinkers, as we call them, now in alphabetic orders, because otherwise it becomes difficult to say who comes first, who comes later. So Bart, the first, Bart Latawer, he's director of the interoperability programs at OGC, the Open Geospatial Consortium. The pictures are taken from LinkedIn, so I'm not accountable for that. That's your responsibility. Just to make it clear out, number one. Number two, Cameron. So he's an honorary lecturer at the University of Glasgow. No one is perfect. I was studying extract live, but okay, that's very technical. He's an expert at GIS and most importantly, he was a former member of the Scottish Executive. He's well known for inspiring Scotland, if I may say that. So he's the Inspiring Scotland man. Inspire is directed for environmental geographical data in Europe. Following, Pietro Elisei is the Vice President of ISOCAP, that's the International Society of City and Regional Planners, and he's also the Director, or President, I don't know, I'm not sure, but anyway, the boss of Urba Sofia, that's a company in Bucharest, Romania. Then we are Martin Forto. Hello Martin.
Hello.
I'm trying to learn how to tweet here. He's the director of GIS Standards and he's also the secretary of CEN CT287. For those of you who are not familiar with it, CEN, which is the European Committee for Standards, has several TC, so technical committees, and the 287 is the one on geographical information. So he is the guy that is coordinating all the standardization activities, and anything that goes through CEN then becomes law, correct? So take him seriously. Then we have Cesare Fornanello, head of research unit at FBK. Again, an expert in a number of matters, expert in data analytics, geodata to some extent, big data, correct me if I'm mistaken again. Then we have Bruce Gittings. He comes from, again, Scotland, or Scotland, as we should say. Scotland, so he is from the University of Edinburgh, Vice Chairman of the Royal Scottish Geographical Society. So a long list of titles. Then we have John Herring. Officially, in your LinkedIn profile, it says you're an architect. Also Brunelleschi was an architect, but not a regular one. So there is one of the, may I say father? Does it sound too
father? Yes.
One of the fathers of all the GI thing at Oracle is very important person. Convener at several groups at ISO. Convener is also representative. Is the representative for Oracle Corporation at the standardization organization, ISO and OGC.
Yeah.
Right. Then Robin Walker, he's editor of GI, professional journalist, so we kind of an expert also as well. And then me, I'm CTO at Trilogies. I suppose everybody knows who, so I'll just skip on that. Okay, so allocate, just a brief introduction of the project, and then we're done. Then we start thinking. So let me start quickly with a video. If it works. It's always plug and pray. Saves me a lot of time to introduce you IoT. It's about indoor and outdoor location. That's the kickoff event. We will have the kickoff meeting in the afternoon. So we're not going into the details of it. It's just for you to know that we have started this, and this first thinkshop is the first initiative of the project. But now, enough, and off we go. So, I would like to start thinking with you about the concept of space. As iLocate deals with indoor and outdoor domains, the concept of space is extremely hard to define. We said that in iLocate we are dealing with public spaces. Public spaces for us are squares, places in the outdoor environment, but there can also be indoor spaces. For instance, the mall, shopping mall, it's a public space. It's privately owned, but it's publicly accessible. So I would like you to start speculating on it, and I would like also to start thinking about the difference between indoor and outdoor spaces. For instance, that's an example, for instance, of that's a real building. That's not fake. It's a huge dome, that's in Japan, where the borders between outdoors and indoor spaces are blending. Pietro, on you, perhaps you want to start this off as a urban planner and give us your point of view on that.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Yeah, public space is essential in urban planning, and IOK is really facing the issue of public space. Now, it's very difficult to give a definition of public space, while actually then we go to different domains. Let's say we can speak about characteristics of public space. It's a space actually that should be easily accessible, first of all. It's a space for all people. And it is a basic asset for designing quality in the city, because everything is happening in the public space. As you say, actually, public space is not what we see outside, a piazza, the strada, the street, the square. Of course, all this is public space. But actually, we have a lot of public space that is inside. You gave the right example, like the mall, like the hospital. But in Italy, we have a great example. The bar. We go to the bar, there's a private home building, but it's a public space where actually social, economic, cultural relation happens. And this is what is important to look for when we speak about public space. It's not the dress, of the city, but the public space is an indicator about the quality of that city in terms of governance, and in terms of economy, in terms of cultural and social relation. And that's the first point when we speak about public space. We are not speaking about something that is material, but we are speaking about a domain where we have material, spatial, physical relation, but we have all the other ones, the immaterial ones that are more important, actually, I think, to policies for public space, governance of public space. Well, actually, this is probably at the limit of IOK, because IOK is going to face not the physical relation, but actually to identify physical relation in an easy way is going to facilitate many other things, the use of time, for example, that can really improve the quality of life of a person. I mean, if I can use my time in the public space in a more easy way, I'm not going around, I don't know where I have to go, as the example we have seen before. Another point that I would like to put on the table is that as town planners, we have a problem, I don't know, even a big opportunity. We are facing now a very rapid urbanization. It means that in the next 40 years, in more developed countries, it's going to double the space for accommodating new people, new inhabitants. And in developing countries, the space for new inhabitants, for people moving from rural area to city, will increase of 300%. It means that we have to stay there. It will be essential to think technology for public space. And of course, I was invited last week in another thinkshop of the United Nations, and the question was, we need to provide a toolkit for public space. That's a really difficult question, but this is what we have to do. We as town planners, we can face the problem of public space from a planning point of view. I mean, new plans, new policy, new initiative, urban design point of view. We make it in this way, but now actually we see that we need help from other sources of knowledge. And I think that ICT and all the knowledge based on geodata can help us as a town planner to find more creative way of designing the public space, because actually public space is transforming itself. All the relations that are happening in the public space should be rethinked and should be redesigned, considering all this new technology, all these new opportunities. This is the first two considerations I would like to put on I mean, growing cities, new technology, redesign the public space, and to have a more integrated public space considering different knowledge in it.
I'll add one item to the game. Camera, perhaps you would like to speak of those. You're taking notes. The concept of space. We also have we have to define the borders of our private space. I mean, of our private space within the public space. We have the ambition of delivering a system which is creating indoor and outdoor location-based services. So defining the border within what is accessible to the public and what is private can be a bit of a challenge. Perhaps you want to speculate on this a little bit.
It's a very simple thing, and I think that geographers have said for many years that everyone is always somewhere. So as a person, I am here in this room. This morning I was in my hotel room, and to come here I was sitting in a minibus, and I relate to all of these spaces. And is there a mechanism where I am tracked? So I know I'm here, but Bart here knows I'm here because he has just sent me a message complaining with me that we haven't got any coffee. Now, I have recorded through the mechanism of, well, Facebook as it happened, that I am sitting here. So I have identified my private space, if you like, and I have shared my private space with Bart, and he has interacted with me. So I guess what we're talking about here is recording where we are and being able to record where we are. And I think this is moving from traditional geography. So, you know, it's fine. I sit with my GPS and bang, I know where I am. But once we start to move inside, I'm in this particular room, but it's three-dimensional. So I'm on the first floor of this building. It starts to get really complicated. And do we understand what we're trying to address? The complications of three-dimensional space, time, space. I don't know. I'm not quite sure that my brain is big enough to get it. I think we have to get it.
We have to get there.
But
we will have to.
Yeah.
And then definitely this problem of indoor and outdoor part, you want to add something. It will create a number of challenges, but
Yeah, I'd like to introduce maybe a couple of terms that haven't been addressed. I think relevant public space, right? You know, we've seen some great pictures of locations, but they were not really relevant to me this morning. Very relevant would be, you know, where can I get some coffee? To pick up on that topic.
mistake. We'll pay for it.
Oh, we'll continue to push on that.
There's a coffee break soon.
Yeah, I think some spaces are real, and I think some others might be a concept, something we talk about. So it's something else maybe we need to pick, or the size of the space. I think the size of the space is as thick as the finger that points to it. If my wife would call me now and say, Bart, where are you? I would say Italy. That would be sufficient for her. And if you would call me now and say, Bart, where are you? And I would say Italy, you would laugh and say, well, I know, but I want to know where you are in this building.
That's an interesting issue, and we will have to sort it out because there is the problem of semantics. For instance, in iLocate, we have this concept of bringing you inside the building. If you are checking in at the hospital and you enter the hospital, the first thing you want to know is you have to go to the west wing or to the east wing. You don't need to know the room at that time. And then as soon as you approach the place also, you will have to change the way you convey information.
Yeah,
Probably
I'm not sure whether that's semantic, then relevant context.
that context. Yeah. Please, Bruce.
Yeah, I think picking up on some of the points that have just been made, particularly where Cameron was going, I think one of the key issues here is an ethical one. And who is this for? Is it for commerce? Is it for the state? Or is it for the individual? If it's for the individual, I think we have very limited concerns. But of course, immediately, the money of commerce and the money of the state are going to come and say, oh, this is a wonderful idea, because, and indeed this already happens within shopping centres, it isn't related personally to individuals, but mobile phones are tracked to find out what retail flows are happening within a shopping centre. The shopping centre manager is going to say, it's fantastic, I want to know, who uses this loyalty card in which store and which other stores they go to, because I want to understand what they're doing. The state is going to say, this is wonderful, because we can find out where all our terrorists are, we can find out who's doing what. In fact, let's just give all babies when they're born an RFID tag and we're fixed. So I think there are some really big ethical issues here that we've got to face as to who's it for, where's it going. If it's for the individual, very limited concerns. If it's individual driven, individual focused, individuals can control what information they provide. But as soon as it moves into the domain of commerce or the state, then we've got big ethical concerns.
Yeah.
Right. Now, first of all, Ken, if you have comments coming from Twitter, just let us know, Mr. Sean.
They are coming.
Yeah, coming already. Good. I can't read them, so I'm afraid you will have to read them.
Sure. Well, up top, what it's saying, there's a lot below the event, there's a lot of pictures of everybody there. We've got people saying they're quite excited for today's events, some descriptions of what the event's about, some pictures of people on the way. Quite a lot of tweets so far, actually. It's going well.
Now, let's keep the ball rolling. The first part of this think shop, it's about the planning part. So I'm trying to now drag you back on the planning side, and then we close this first section on planning. Cesare, you might want to add something.
I love the line, so I would add the concept of having the right.
Sorry, can you talk up?
Yes, I was thinking about the right of access. So not only, whenever we're thinking of education, we also need to know if given we have an impairment in mobility or any other restriction in our life, we also need to know in advance we are capable to reach the place. And in the future, we would like to know the quality of the air or the environment. So this is something which is adding, say, the physical forces of the physiological environment. So we have this project called Rovereto in Trentino, which we can provide information about accessibility, and that came out to be much more complicated. So it's not just a physical, but it's a capability for planning. So you can choose different locations. So that's also an addition to the physical description.
Daniele, you're not officially within the thinkers, but you sneaked in. So now you're asking your question. There you go. That's the pay you pay. The price you pay for sitting at that table.
Let me throw something more on the table, which is basically how technology is changing the perception of public spaces. So, because basically right now, what we see is this kind of trend in which basically, boundaries are blurring, becoming liquid between online and offline, but also between private and public. This comes from the fact that by interacting with technology, by getting more and more interactions mediated by technology, this is changing the way we reflect about reality. And so my question here for the experts is how this is actually changing the perception and the definition of public spaces, and how we can actually profit from it. Because it's not just saying, at least I believe, okay, we have this public space and we have this new technology, so how can we profit from the technology? But it's also the other way around. So how the technology is bringing forward a new definition of what a public space is and how basically people interact with it.
Fantastic. That brings me to this slide. I love this. This is the periodic table of city planning elements. That's exactly what I wanted. This is unplanned. I mean, I really thank you for that. It was the right comment at the right time. The idea is here that we have, I'm not taking any credits for it. This is Stephen's planning and design. I hope one day I will have the pleasure to meet this guy because he's a fantastic designer. So this is the table of elements, but rather than having the elements like iron, ore and so on, you have different components like apartments, zoos, shopping mall, coffee shops, so the elements that make city planning. Pietro, back on you.
I'd like to react to Daniele. That's a very good point of view. There is a lot of confusion, I mean, at least among town planners, because there is some in the definition of public space. There is still a lot of methodological positions like public space should be even public owned, and public space is actually where people meet for not making profit. No? Many town planners think in this way, but you're right. Something is moving. Everything is in this relation between public and private. I mean, new trends are demonstrating that you have good quality in the city, but even good economic performances in the moment that the public space is permitting, is even asset to have more value for private buildings. And this is actually the transition that we're going to have now in planning.
Ivo, you want to comment on something?
Okay, thank you. Sorry for my very bad English, but
May I ask you just name,
let
surname,
me ask
and organization?
a little question. The public space, as we know it, is public because I can put my private space into the public space and can be anonymous. But now, I locate, and I suppose other project too, points to trace, to locate things and people, to trace people. Probably in the future the private space with this kind of technology will be a survey space where I cannot be there in an anonymous way. So I'm a little afraid of that, and I'm asking what will be the future public space? It is a safe space, or it's a space where I cannot be in a free way? I don't know.
Martin.
I think to sort of possibly round off this space-time continuum here, I'd like to actually throw into the works the fact that we're talking about public space, private space in public space, but we're also forgetting, for instance, utilities. Space below the brick.
Yeah, public space is not for profit. I mean, I think there's on this chart probably market. The market is in the public space, and thank God they do make profit.
I agree with you actually, and this was even my position in this thinkshop of the United Nations.
Thinkshop is us. United Nations have a workshop.
No, you said it. Stop. Hang on, because I think that's, you wanted this to be a think shop. This is a think shop, and I think that's exactly right. The public space is public. The marketplace is in the public place. So that's what you're saying. You're saying the public space is not in the commercial sector. The commercial sector is in the public space.
Well, no. What I meant to say was, where you buy vegetables and fruit is what I call, the farmer's market.
Yeah.
That is in the public space.
It's in the public space, but it's not the public space.
That's why I said, public space is a concept.
That's a shop.
I think it is determined with what you want to do with it.
Bruce.
I think that's true. I don't want to get hung up on semantics. I think it's determined what you want to do with it, but I think also picking up the gentleman's point there, it's determined by whose rules apply. So I'll give you an example. I'm quite a keen photographer, and I go around Scotland for a project I'm involved in, taking photographs of all sorts of interesting places, spaces and so on. But if I go to a shopping centre, even an outdoor shopping centre, I have been asked to leave by taking photographs. So they have rules that say you can't take a photograph of this public space. So I think it's very important as this project proceeds that we give thought to whose rules apply, because I'm quite happy to understand where I am and have anonymity within a space, providing my rules apply. Where I get upset is where somebody else's rules apply and say, well, you can come into our public space, we want to monitor you, but actually you can't use the tools to your benefit within our space because our rules apply. So whose rules apply? That's where I worry about the definition of public versus private space.
Martin, I think Bruce, that's exactly the point, isn't it? And I just hadn't realised it before. What you're really saying is that when you pick up the phone and you ring the bank and they say this call may be recorded, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, you can hang up the phone, but if you want to speak to the bank, you have no choice. You have to be recorded. That's a UK law, not necessarily another country's law. And so what I think, if I understand you, Bruce, is correct, is that the rules of security, maybe Scott ought to actually speak on this one, but the rules of security on this ought to be the rules that apply to the space that is applicable. So if it's your private space, your rules apply. If it's a car park applies the rules.
Well, that's not quite what I was saying. I think if it is your private space, your personal private space, of course rules apply. But what I don't want is a situation where I go to a shopping centre and I want to use a technological output of this project to say, oh, you know, what's the most optimal way of moving around the shops or whatever, and the shopping centre says to me, no, you can't do that because that's our space. If that is a space they are sharing with the public, if I share my house with the public, then I think actually the public should have a view as to what rules apply. If I'm not sharing my space with the public, then it is clearly my rules. But I think there is a grey area in terms of whose rules apply between public and private space. I think that's where this project is going to have to review its ethical issues or adjust.
Well, it doesn't. It's a practical one, because if we take this one step further and say we want this to apply, and one of the examples you used in the presentation there is how to get to a ward or a room in the hospital. And how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to use probably my mobile phone, and that's where the app will be, and it's going to take me. But as soon as I walk into that hospital, there's a big sign that says you must switch off your mobile phone because it's going to screw up your machinery. Then, you know, it falls at the first fence.
Yeah.
So
that's an issue. That's very true. That's very true.
But it's practical technology reason, but it's the same thing. And I'm really with Bruce here on the ethical issues of being tracked. So my private space is no longer private because it belongs to somebody else, because they know where I am. But also then the point about the rules about what that space is.
Right. I have the privilege of knowing most of you, and I think Scott might want to say something here.
I'm Scott Couch, I'm a security privacy type of guy. I think the point that's been touched up is that there is an ethical dimension, which is much more than just like privacy. We have well-defined rules for private data, and in fact what we're talking a lot here is context. So my private space is contextual, and if I share that context, I share much more than just my space. I share what I'm doing, and there's a duty of care to protect that. The problem we have in technology is there are no technical systems. I think what we've got to look towards is going way beyond the current privacy debate, way beyond the current security debate, and start to ask, how do we make ethical systems that are technically based, where we can actually simply replace a human actor with a machine actor and have the same requirements and same expectation of ethical behaviour. And this is something that I think we're going to spend a lot of time in this project, in the Allocate project, looking at, because privacy is kind of difficult. I mean, the basis of privacy is consent. So I allow you to use my data. And when we talk about public spaces, they become public because they're open. And if you extend that to the data role, essentially they're giving up the data and you're allowed to use it. It's the how do they then use the knowledge that you're using that data? That's where consent comes in. But then beyond consent, there's an ethical dimension. So I think what we're looking towards is much more how do we model, how do we make systems ethical, and how do we translate human behaviours into realisable machine behaviours which act in a way that we can have the same kind of issues. And I'm going to talk about this on Friday, but if you look at the Hippocratic Oath, and the original Hippocratic Oath is in Greek, so I don't read it. Then there's the modern Code of Ethics, which is quite complex, and it's very much based on human actors. Ultimately, what they often down to is do no harm. And what we need to do is try and make sure that we know what a device is doing, what machinery is doing, so we can start to translate that. Is the balance in favour of greater good than harm? Because at some point you've got to make, a machine will make a decision. There's a great example of a Wi-Fi based or Bluetooth based insulin pump. Now that insulin pump is very good. It allows you to control your insulin injections remotely, but that could be attacked remotely, and then the machine is suddenly doing harm when it was never designed ethically in the first place. It was never designed with privacy and security protection. So we've got to look at this idea of building in security from day one, building in privacy from day one, but actually building an ethical system from day one. And that's not going to be trivial.
No, not at all. In fact, I wanted to start moving on to a more technical perspective. So we started from the concept of space, and now I'll try to focus again on technology, because that's in the end what this is all about. The concept of the ethical system, it's particularly complex. I don't know even if we will have the resources to address that, but at least we start from the concept of being smart. I suppose that being ethical should be a byproduct or a collateral features of being smart as a system. I don't know, that's an assumption that we can discuss it. Let me briefly go through the concept of smart as we know it in the literature, and then I would like you to comment on it. I've gone through Wikipedia, of course, the first thing you do usually in this case, to see what is smart city about. And I found, this is the sort of standard definition, that smart city is about smart economy. So we have different components, and that's the first. Then we have smart mobility. Again, it's all about moving people, and I feel that iLocate, it's pretty much about this again. Smart energy, this is might not be very relevant to us. Then we have smart environment. God knows, probably Cesar might want to comment on this, he's probably an expert. Then we have smart people. That's probably the most important bit. We have the human side of it. That's a tribute to Bart, by the way. There's Bart singing there. Then there is this smart living. It really becomes fuzzy. I don't know what smart living is about. Is having a living room somewhere in a smart way? I really don't know.
I'm not sure.
Exactly. Then we have the smart governance, so it becomes even more complicated. I've got the feeling that it's just a number of buzzwords in a line. Anyway, that's what we've written. I think John, you probably wrote this, or Martin, sorry. I'm not sure who the two of you wrote this. Is you? What did you do? Then it's Martin. Okay. So again, let's try and see from a technical point of view. Now, this ethical, it will be one of the challenges. We have an ethical board within the project that we will have to address all these issues. But I would like you to comment on it, Bart.
Yeah. Just before I make that comment, I heard you say that a city is going to go 300% on a yearly basis. That means it doubles every 3 months.
We are in a very strange phase. It's like to be every month a new Greater London in the next 30 years.
Yeah, I heard recently that Denver is growing at 7% per year, right? So that means it has a doubling time of 10 years.
It's incredible, actually. We are creating the area of
Right.
the Greater London, around 1,500 square kilometers. Every month, a new city is popping up in the world.
Yeah.
But actually, if we observe Europe, we have the opposite problem in many countries.
Well,
We observe the shrinking cities.
Well, if they do this instead of that, they do that.
exactly.
But the end result is the same.
Toward Asia, toward East, and toward Africa, and we see that we have Latin America. We have this number, we have this figure that are popping up. So we need to build public space, to design and to put public space inside. So
Yeah, and that's where I don't have a definition for smart city, but I think we have to do things differently. If we continue to do what we did, we will get probably the same result. I think that's a definition of being an idiot, is doing the same thing but expecting something different. So I think on this one is we have to do things differently in the future, city-wise with the public space.
how? That's
And then, it depends on what we want to do with it. That will determine how we will do it differently. I
Then
guess.
always when they have a crisis in the town, they go back to public space. When we had now in the last 25, 30 years problems of urban regeneration in Europe, after the deindustrialization, we went back to public space and we were investing in public space. Glasgow, for example, Barcelona. And we catch up to a new economy, working on public space.
Yeah.
But that's different. These are new cities that are coming now.
Yeah, I think cities will need more of vision that they have today. Someone told me, talking about Brussels, and I don't live too far from Brussels. What I miss in Brussels is a vision. They don't have a vision, things just happen. I hope there's no, someone here from Brussels. I do apologize. But you need a much stronger vision for that to happen, I think, and for the introduction of IT, for us to go about with indoor and outdoor technology.
When you look at the IT bar, what you're saying, for instance, on another project, we're looking at developing three-dimensional GML through cities for people in wheelchairs and blind people. And the crew actually wanted to say, well, for a blind person, they could smell the flowers in a garden or a coffee shop or something like that. And I thought, but that's what I want to do. I don't want to go the shortest route. I want to go the prettiest route. And so sometimes we actually forget that we try to think how people want to be rather than let people be who they are. And so I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that bringing it back to the IT point of view, we actually need to think of how we use the technology to allow people to make their own decisions rather than us telling them to go by the coffee shop because you'll smell your way to where you're trying to go, or go by this ramp because it's the quickest way because you're in a wheelchair.
Coffee shop is not a bad idea.
No, we'll come in a few minutes. But I want to go via the coffee shop.
But a coffee shop in Italy or in the Netherlands?
Uncomparable.
Okay, let me throw in a little bit of provocation. So again, when it comes to smart city being smart, let's back on track on the IT side. We have the smart sensors part. Let's see how we can make use of this in the big picture of IoT. Then we have the IoT, Internet of Things. I've got the feeling that it's again yet another buzzword. Everybody knows the merger the acquisition of Nest by Google. Was it really? Which is the impact that will have this? Then Internet of Things, Internet of Everything. Location, again, let me try and get you a few hints where I would like you to think about it. New technologies. This will change also the paradigm of the way we interact with the environment, possibly. For instance, we have now the Google Glass coming. This will change the paradigm, for sure, of the way we see the city, the way we interact with space, the way we access information in space, and I'm sure that in iLocate we will be right in the middle of this technical evolution. We will benefit from our DIY technology, Google Glass thing. I love this. I use it another time. It's always makes it, but it's not me. So again, aspect of the smart city. Now we are getting into a little bit more. We are stepping into the technical domain. Can also be seen as technologies that support sensor web enablement, then augmented reality, smart grids, and the Internet of Things. Let's try to take this and discuss about this in the domain of location. That's what we are focusing on. Cesar? Oh. You are taking notes. I mean, this is on purpose. We're prepared for it.
Whilst you think, none of these can happen without location. So if a sensor might be telling what the temperature is, but if that is without location, is very irrelevant. It's 8 degrees. Where? Well, I have no clue. Same thing for augmented reality, location and direction, vector, and all that is important. Same for smart grids, I think, audio and everything.
Well, smart grid is exactly the problem because smart grid you've just gone down below the ground, on the ground, and above the ground.
Yeah, 3D
Created that. And I think, John, I don't want to, was it Michelangelo? If it doesn't move, it's not interesting. Well, I can't remember what he said. Anyway, the point is, if it's not moving, it's not interesting. In other words, we're people, we're moving, we're interesting. It's static, it's easy to pinpoint. It's us with the privacy to be able to go where we need to go and the interaction between us that we need, but keeping the privacy that's important.
John, do you want to comment on this?
I think I'll wait.
You skip it. You skip it.
At the moment, we're talking conceptually, which is fine, because eventually we're going to have to actually put this in a computer somehow. And the first thing you need is a good conceptual model. And we can talk about how that works later. My definition of smart has nothing to do with the object itself. It has whether there's an avatar for that thing in a computer system somewhere. And that's what we're worried about. The avatar, how it works, how well it predicts, how well it describes.
So you mean the way you model the person or the human being?
The keyword you use was model. The computer actually builds a digital model, an alternate reality, if you will, a parallel universe that is going to predict what's happening in the real world. And so in the real world, there's a stone there with may or may not have a sensor, I don't care. But as long as that stone has a representation in the computer that I can query, then that stone is freaking Einstein. It's a smart stone. In augmented reality, you figure a location out for you. You can take I had a screen up with a picture of a castle. I didn't have the foggy search what a castle was. It was something Microsoft gave me. So a guy from Google came up with his phone, took a picture of it, and then about 5 minutes later he told me what castle it was and where it was located. So yes, there was no location associated with that picture, but it could be associated if you had information on his image database somewhere that said this is what this castle is. So what we're talking about here, the word smart in front of anything basically means to me, or should mean to any of us in this room, that there is a representation of that thing somewhere on a computer that you have possible access to. And the whole thing about privacy, public and stuff, is the control of that proper access. So our security guy here has to make sure that only the people who can read stuff are the people who should be reading it.
I think that having the model of the environment is necessary. But what you also need is having a model of the user. Because the way then the interaction will be built between the model of the environment and you as a user will depend on how you are modeled. And the influence of those two models when it comes to location and changing the way you interact with the system according to your model. And this model, by the way, can change over time. Because you might change your requirements over time. Because one time I am a visitor of the hospital, but another time I'm a patient of the hospital. It's always me, but somehow my model or my avatar, if you like, is changing the requirements, and therefore the interaction with the system should be changing. So what I'm saying is that we are always talking about modeling the reality, but we should also think about how to probably model again, and that's one of the challenges that we will have in iRocade, model different users, and then change the way you interact with the system according to this.
Yeah, you model anything you want to study.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, basically physics or whatever you want to talk about, scientists do not figure out what reality is. Scientists find models that work. give them real predictions about what's going to happen when they do something. So Galileo was the one who figured out that if you drop two stones out of the top of the Tower of Pisa, it doesn't matter how big they are, they both hit the ground at the same time. And that's different from the model that everybody else had at that point. They didn't do the heavier stone fell faster. They were wrong.
But, Cesar,
So just to give you an example, we've been looking to smart sources of smart data from smart cities. We ended up with one example is that of illumination. So you can assume you can have model of illumination. You can assume you have a location of the light from the public. You can start using that, for instance, for integrating this information with crime. So, I mean, location of crimes, and the potential for giving different illumination in areas which are more risky. And this can be also altered dynamically. So if you have people that are entering in an area, you may want to change the illumination of this area. Now, you can have also this will be something technical, but also people having sensors can contribute to improve the modeling all the time. So this is actually, and this is not sensitive in terms of, I think it's not sensitive in terms of privacy. So this is a good example of which the data from the system can be actually physically sensitive. You can choose your path according to the light you want.
Randy simply does. Reality interacting with a representation of reality, or multiple representations of reality is sort of what John is saying, right?
Well, you can have multiple representations, but I was thinking basically, hopefully, those will work off the same general representation. That's the point of the standard.
Right, but it depends on the script or the model that you use depends on what you want to do with it. You have various models of the same reality. It depends on, if you don't have a right example, I'll come to it. But
what you need to do, if we're going to build this parallel universe, then pretty much we need to put all the information that we can in the same place. And so we need basically application-independent data. We don't want to have to build different databases for different applications because they need different things. That's going to put us into a multiplicative factor that's unusable.
so you're suggesting a unified model?
I'm suggesting play the data where it lays. You have to define how you're going to access it. You don't care what the data looks like in its base form. You just have to be able to know that between me and it, there is a bridge that does what I need to do to make it look like I need it to look.
Okay. I'll give an example. We're in India. I'll use a Ferrari. If I look at a Ferrari, I'm interested in how fast does it go from 0 to 100, and horsepower, that sort of stuff. If my wife looks at a Ferrari, she'll look at the interior and say, "Oh, nice seats." If my accountable is looking at the Ferrari and say, "Well, it'll cost you that many thousands of euros per month." Those are three different models for the same thing, but you use it to do something different.
Those are three pieces of data connected to the same object.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
There's only one freaking Ferrari, no matter how you look at it.
Well, that is from reality, but you use it in different ways, and therefore, I think every model should be falsifiable, because you build a model for the purpose. You're not building a model to do everything.
No, but you don't necessarily have to use it for the purpose it was built for.
It was, probably built for speed, but not necessarily to have a nice interior.
It was built to make Enzio rich.
Oh, okay.
Besides, teleological arguments are silly.
Sorry?
Arguments based on purpose are silly. The thing exists, whether or not whoever did it for whatever reason doesn't make a difference. It exists.
It exists, but the way we model it is different.
It's possible. Well, actually, the data we have about it may be different. We're getting here into a strange point. There's still only one Ferrari.
And
But
then what
your
Ferrari is
representation
doing
in the
one place.
virtual world is different.
Yeah, but again, I would like to bring you back to the concept of location, because I feel we are stepping off the beaten path.
Where is the Ferrari?
Where is the Ferrari? I mean, the point is, where is the Ferrari and where is the driver if it's parked there alone? So back again to the same.
It's outside.
Sorry?
It's
That's
outside.
outside. So now the point is, we said, one of the things we said in text was the ultimate realization of this vision, and I'm referring to the vision of being smart, or smart city, smart location, will not be the work of any single vendor, nor will be the outcome of a single joint project. This is obvious from multiplicity, its full implementation. Now, yesterday we were discussing about this concept of multiplicity. Probably, there we go again with multiple models. Multiple software technologies, multiple modes of motion or locomotion, as you were commenting yesterday, multiple modes of communication, multiple modes of location. So that is really what I would like to speculate on in terms of iLocate. Yesterday you were making the point, locomotion rather than motion. Can you again?
Yeah, there's motion from the person moving, but he could be moving in various ways. That he could be on foot, could be on a bike, could be in a wheelchair, and that pretty much determines how you're going to go from A to B, I guess. To Martin's point earlier on. That's something we need to take into account.
Now, one thing that we do have is the concept of multimodality. And again, that's something that we'll have to address. We have also someone from TUE Technical University at Eindhoven that will have to deal also on this very issue from the technical point of view. Cameron, I've seen you taking plenty of notes. You might want to comment on this.
Well, yeah, I think what's starting to worry me a wee bit about this is that it's just the whole logic of it, because I'm starting to think, again, sorry, I'm going back to the Ferrari, and you know, you're saying, well, actually, yes, John's right, there is one object there, that vehicle is an object, but surely what we're then looking at isn't actually, the object is just something, it's all the data. What we're interested in is the data that's associated with it. So, you know, Bart is absolutely right. You know, the accountant is worried about how much it's going to cost, all the data associated with that. But the police are interested in the number plate because they need to be able to identify that entity. And that entity will change its location, you know, from 0 to 100, you know, in a minute it'll be gone, you know, 20 kilometres down the road. Therefore, the sheer, what I'm starting to think is that the sheer volume of data that we need here to model this place thing, because the data I want about that hospital as a patient or as a visitor is very different from the data that the doctor needs or the nurse needs or whatever. And just trying to get my head around now what we're trying to deal with here about the interface between me as a person and the place. So defining that place, modelling that place, and getting all the data about the place. So for instance, I'm a zoologist, I'm an ecologist, but I want to know, I'm looking out there at that mountain up there, and I want to know everything about that mountain, about its geology, about its archaeology, about its history. Where are we going to get all this data, and who's going to define what it is and where it's going to be stored?
Now, let me try to change point of view. I'll assume that the way we produce data will change because there is all this crowdsourcing new way of producing data. We have data, it will probably become a problem if not a resource, but let's change paradigm. Let's assume for the time being that we have data. We have the bloody Ferrari sitting here. And we have the concept of location. Now the system, or let's call it system, generally speaking, knows that I'm there. It knows that I'm approaching the car. It's winter, it's -10. The heating goes on automatically while I'm walking to the car. And as soon as I get in the car gets warmer. Now, I want this to work with me, with this bloody Ferrari, but I want to have it working also with my Panda. Now, the problem is that it's not only I'm trying to provoke you in terms of interoperability because I don't want to have two different apps because I've changed my car and I have to change everything. I'm approaching my car and I want that the heating goes on automatically based on my location, regardless whether this is a Ferrari or a Panda, of course, if the feature is provided by people. But what I'm trying to say, let's move on the data issue and let's try to think on new ways of using this data based on location. And of course then, the problem of interoperability, we will like it or not, will rise, will come at some point, because as I mentioned, you don't want to change the app. But you are hard thinking.
Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled with how you introduced this one. Interoperability is, well, you know, being from the OGC, we're all about interoperability and standards. And we think that allows for innovation. Interoperability, or the standard itself is not the innovation, but it allows for innovation. So coming to your example of, you said heating?
Heating,
Yeah. So like, that's more outside temperature than it is location, I think.
But it's also location, because it has to go on as soon as I approach the car. Not
Oh, okay, so your location to the car.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
System
Well, if I would have designed a system, you know, for the Ferrari, then I want to sell that, well, I'm selling it to Fiat anyway. If I sell it to Ferrari, I guess, well, whether I install it in a Ferrari or in a Panda, it's the same thing. So it would be silly if it would be totally different. So if I would have a heating system, I want it to be interoperable so I can install in multiple cars. So I make more money. What Enzo wanted to do.
Well, that's the point of view of someone who comes from the standardization issue.
Yeah.
And that's right. But what I'm trying to say is we have to try and think in a sort of different way. We will have the data, we will have plenty of data, we will have more data that we will be capable to handle what we do with this data. And it's all about location. So let's try and see new ways of using these data. I'm trying to be provocative because location is becoming pervasive or something. I mean, we have geography and location almost everywhere. A few years ago, you would use yellow pages to find the closest restaurant, and now you're just Googling or you're using TripAdvisor to see where the closest restaurant is. So there is a change in paradigm. And again, interoperability will play a big role, we like it or not, because you have closed silos as we know it.
But the interoperability has more to do with making access for other people to plug in. You know, I mean, when you look around this room or rooms, there are sockets for plugging your cables into, your I don't know, computers into. And that's the interoperability I want. I don't care what goes on behind the socket. I care the fact that I'm providing an interface that something can plug into it. So interoperability for me is that we can, I think following John's point of view, create a human being in a machine, an avatar, so that we can actually access the data, whatever it is. In other words, I don't care whether I want a red Ferrari or a fast Ferrari. I just care that when I'm looking at, I mean, when I Google, I don't Google for, you know, I could Google for a red Ferrari. The data is there. I could Google for a fast Ferrari. The information's there. But the interoperability at the other end needs to be made allowable. And that's going to be very important for us dealing with location. But we're not only dealing with location, we're dealing with the ability to provide interface for people to build products on it so that they can sell products based on, in my opinion, open standards.
Yeah, I would just add that there are two aspects here. One is about standardization, which I look at it as kind of interoperability at the lower level. But then I'm more concerned about semantic interoperability, which is kind of what, I represent a startup company here. And this is what I really care about. I mean, if I have to develop an app that uses GPS data for Android, I can do it in 2 hours. I am very bad at software development. Okay? Because basically there is one way to access GPS data, which is standard across the platform. If I want to do it for indoor location, that's bloody. That's just a mess. Because I need to know the specific technology I want to use. I need to know which specific API I expose to that specific vendor and so on and so forth. And I need some kind of glue in between, something which offers me a free waste, on top of which I can easily develop applications.
Okay, I would say that we can bring up for coffee. Coffee? Italian coffee. 5 minutes. Okay.
Can I sure. You said the data is there and there's lots of data. Actually, I would argue with that. There is, I think we need a new paradigm with data. And we live in this sort of geographical world that in the UK we have the Ordnance Survey and lots of data. Yes, we've got outdoor data, and there's still big holes in that, as the OpenStreetMap project has shown. In the UK we have cycling tools and they use these for us. But in terms of indoor data, I don't think we've got the data. Some of the data is in architects' offices around the country, but I'm looking out there buildings that were probably built either in the 1950s, 1960s. We haven't got data for these. How do we get that data? What is what is going to enthuse people to collect that data? They can't do it the same way they've done with OpenStreetMaps because you're going into potentially private spaces or going out to or semi-public spaces. So I think we've got a big challenge in terms of data. There's a lot of data we think we have the actual.
You're opening the Pandora's box because one of the problems we will have.
That's what academics do.
No. But one of the problems we have is dealing with indoor mapping data. I mean, I would like also to have the point of view of those within the public, like public administration and so on, because we said that within the project we will create a portal, which is like OpenStreetMap, but for indoor spaces. We will have a number of issues, legal issues, practical issues, business issues, because some of the business might not want to share that data. So we will have also to leverage either on existing movements, for instance, OpenStreetMap and team up with them, or make them understand that this is important to them, so we can help them enrich their portfolio of solution, in this case data, by providing support to indoor mapping data. But again, this is not only technical. It's more of a, again, sociological, practical. And again, I would like to have your feedback here because we will be dealing with data, indoor mapping data regarding office, public offices, for instance. So the point of view of public administration here is particularly relevant. Hospitals, these are public buildings anyway, shopping malls, airports, that sort of public spaces, but perhaps also shops, with the idea that if I provide the mapping data of my shop, then I can create an indoor location service that can be developed by someone else, but then provide access to my shop and bring me more customers. But that's not the trigger. It's a fine balance. We are walking on eggs. I guess you must say that. It's very difficult.
Please add a couple of things. What it comes to me is that also near real-time access to data for location is really important. Let's suppose, for instance, someone is having a guided tour into a museum, and the system is not able to refresh your position in real time. So it provides you information maybe 5 minutes ago. So I have completely different group, completely different opera outputs and so on. Also, another technical aspect is if the device used by the user is only passive or active. Also, these, of course, introduce some interesting.
Right. We are trying to develop something that provides, of course, real-time information. But we'll get this in later. Let's say that the granularity, the temporal granularity of location is technology dependent. Technology improves. Right now we are able to track people at certain speed. In 2 years' time they will become better, hopefully. We will focus on the infrastructure. But you're right, that will be mission critical, because if you provide a slow service, it won't be usable. So that's one issue. But I would like to change again perspective. If I'm going within a museum, am I supposed to use the app of the museum, or may I have a unique app that access all the museums?
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
the problem. That's the problem. And
That's
now,
back to the point I made much earlier.
Exactly.
Is it
Now-
your rules or my rules?
now, for instance, I'm asking the province of Bolzano or the province of Trento, you as a public office, would you be willing to share your data as open data, your indoor mapping data, for instance, to the public to provide better services? Or you as an organization, you're a private organization, well, it's sort of semi-public, would you be happy to share your indoor mapping data to let someone else develop service that use your space, or is it mine? Then of course, it might not be the entire mapping of the building. You might have areas that you don't want to disclose. But again, which is your point as a user or as a provider of services?
Sorry. Well, first of all, coffee is now ready. But before you go, two things, because I'm going to go first. Two things. First of all, I think that this access of data, Bruce, I don't think it's critical mass. My daughter's 22 years old. At the age of 3, they had a computer room. Their mother didn't understand Google, didn't see the purpose because she couldn't find anything on it. Today, we use Google as like it's a natural thing. Data comes if people want to provide it. Now, you may frown, but that's what will happen, and that I think is what's your name again? You know, that's the whole point, is that if you create a situation where somebody wants to provide the data, they will provide it. And provided we do a model that we can actually find that data, it will be found. It's a chicken and egg, and our job is to find the location. But before we go, Ken, change it back, please, the screen. Before we go, I'd just like to thank Ken, who's on his first outing to one of these meetings. And if you can just flash around, you will actually see he has been mind mapping the whole conversation, which will be available to you. So he's going between Twitter, thank you, and mind map. Bless him, it's his first time of doing this, so, you know, thank you, Ken.
So we stop for a coffee break. It's ready now. Okay, right. And then we start back from this one. Thank you.
The tend to be obstructed by different paying systems or things. So the answer is definitely yes. We want to provide data in a very open way, through services, through standards, and so on. And let me make a little point. We intended, we work on since 25 years, maybe more, on the GIS of our province. We intended always the map as an entry point to like a geographical menu to get information through the map. So this new evolution that we see that every one of us can be now through his localization can be in a natural menu of information around me. It is, for my, in my opinion, it is an evolution. What we always seen that the map has to be. So it's okay. So I see also this allocate project as positive, always with the restrictions of being surveyed, and so it's not so good for my field, for the society, which is probably the society of my children.
Right.
But sharing data is very important because we see now, we have now, I spoke to Cameron a couple of minutes ago about that. We see now we have feedback from the industry now, because they are they now realize that they can use highly standardized data services, geodata services, for their business purposes. They can use that services we provide freely, without charge, and they can make their own business on that. And they now they are realized that, and they give us in these days. Yesterday I have two companies which they say, wow, we can use your data. This big amount of data freely, we can use it in a service you provide. I tested it, it works. It is a very good feeling for us, because we have we feel a strong obligation to give out that data, which had a very big amount of costs in the last 20 years of collecting that data.
But now again, we are trying to change the paradigm, or not changing exactly the paradigm, because the paradigm is the same, but we are changing focus because we go from the outdoor to the indoor. For instance, I would like also to know the point of view from those museums and other public administration involved in either case. Which is your point of view when it comes to, again, sharing data? And then I will try to speculate also. I would like to know the point of view of Kathleen from Luxembourg in terms of a business perspective. How do you see that? And then we move on to the sociological aspect, and that's the last bit I would like to explore. Can you tell us your point of view?
In a hospital?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm managing the emergency hospital, and data is vital for our patients. But sharing data, it depends on us to convince that data is vital, because in order to have a real diagnostic, we need data in time. In this time that patient needs. Sharing data means that the patient knows everything about hospital and the facilities. Because we met in the hospital, and the patient has access to all the facilities of the hospital. But it's something different in our hospital. We don't have a mapping of our services we offer. We are the most important provider of healthcare services in our area. You have to excuse my English, please. But next time, I promise it will be better.
No, it's really very good. Okay? The point is, for instance, we've seen when it comes to using location information within the hospital environment, we've seen the experience here in Trento and in Rovereto. You've got the feeling, it's a mixed feeling. You always say, well, it's nice for the patients because they know how to get to a given place within the hospital. It might not be as nice for the operators if they are tracked, because there is always the privacy issue. But it can be very good in different contexts. For instance, if you can track operators within the surgical theater and exactly tell the position of those operators within the surgery theater, and know exactly that they do not have to enter a specific area,
yes,
then having very precise localization of people becomes extremely important, mission critical somehow. So again, it's a mixed feeling. I've got the feeling that, at least my perspective is, that we have this change of paradigm, because we have, again, the mobile, everything is mobile, everything is ubiquitous now. We are used to access information everywhere and to be localized outdoor, and therefore soon, hopefully, indoor. But the cultural change will be the main driver. I was discussing with John over the coffee break. We have the requirement from the users that might have new needs and then can drive technology. But then, of course, if you don't have the technology, you can't build an app on a vacuum, you were saying. So it's a two-way approach. Certainly what we have is, this cultural change now is a matter of fact. Most of you are tweeting now, all of you are typing, and so this is a matter of fact, and geography somehow, now it's becoming ubiquitous, so we are used to it. Then what I'm trying to explore, what I would like to explore with you in the last part of this brainstorming, we have now a little bit less than 45 minutes. It's just to see how we can make use of indoor location within new scenarios. Catherine,
Giuseppe, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but nobody laughed. Are they not watching the screen? No. I mean, that's funny,
Thank you, Martin.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm paying attention to it.
Thank you. Now, Catherine, would you like to give us your point of view from the point of view of the exploitation side? Where do you see the business opportunity? In short, introduce you are.
Yeah, I think people may be more willing to share data than previously, but still at the moment you do so only if you can find an added value for your own business. So the people who are providing the data, it has to support them in improving their own services. The way they work, they have to be more productive, they have to serve better their clients. For an hospital it makes sense if they can have a better relationship with the patients, or if the doctors can make their job in an easier way. So I guess we have to think about applications in which everyone has an added value, the one who is providing the data and the one who is using the data. But it has to provide added value in the entire ecosystem, because the people won't share just for the sake of sharing.
I strongly agree. Yes. If you provide data, it has to be for your, to see the benefit for yourself as well. And maybe to add an element to that is get a form of feedback. I've been involved in a project on crowdsourcing. People participate if they get feedback. If there's no feedback from the system, people will stop sharing. Maybe just an additional point to that.
Now, if there is a man here that knows what the geo-business and location and the impact on business, this is done. Your point of view now.
I'm a little bit afraid of this presentation, but by the way, regarding the exploitation possibilities, which are a lot in terms of applications, sharing data, involving different businesses and so on, I have to say I'm really afraid that there can be a big barrier in terms of connecting networks. We are thinking of a Ferrari plant and so on, but do we have roads in which these vehicles can run away? Imagine that, particularly for the indoor related applications and technologies, if we are in the ground floor in an hospital and we have these wonderful applications supporting users of different types, do we have sufficient Wi-Fi connections? I know that this is not a technological aspect on which iLocate is focusing on, but I think we have to think about to do not suffer the digital divide in terms of bandwidth and connection capabilities in order to enjoy these applications, not in terms of users, but also in terms of businesses that we want to create added value on.
And I also have another point, because if you think, for instance, of indoor systems, and then you have the indoor routing mechanism, this is traditionally based on graphs. But the point is that when you are stepping into the indoor domain, you don't have a road graph. In the indoor domain, you usually don't have it as such. You have CAD maps. So if you want to facilitate use of indoor data, there is probably a missing bit here. I'm talking from the technical point of view, but you look concerned about this. You don't have an indoor road graph, street graph within indoor spaces. The only thing you have, if you have it, is a CAD file with the rooms and corridors. So there is also a technology problem there.
For which you could derive a graph.
Sure. Yeah.
This takes us into the BIM, if that means anything to people in the world of where we go from CAD into GIS. We were discussing this yesterday, and it's obviously vital that happens. But I don't think it's a big problem. If the data exists, I mean, the lady said they don't have a map of the hospital. That's a real problem. But where you do have maps of buildings, then fine. It's a relatively small step.
Jason, would you like to?
Maybe I have a question then for the hospital. Do you have access to your architectural designs of your hospital?
No.
Oh,
Use them where you
Yes, I have.
okay, so they could be used to derive, well, or derive information that is useful for indoor navigation.
Maybe.
Well, I was going to say, Bart, it's the same thing, because when I had a house built
Maybe. Why? Why do you want to do that?
Earlier on, I understood that that information was not available to you right now. But you could get access to that information if you would interpret your architectural information that you get from your architect.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's a new building or an older building.
No, it's an old building, but
You have the paper plans.
yes, we have.
Okay. So, you know, in new buildings, they're sort of designed with another paradigm. It's called building informational modeling, where you design
But
your
we
building.
have to manage this equation.
Yeah.
We have an old building and we have to do something with this.
Yeah, but you know, the paper plans could be a good starting point
Yes.
for that indoor.
It's actually probably a good business model. I mean, finding a service which allows you to smoothly get a digital master out of this old paper done. Okay, it's just not true.
Martin, you're right. When I built a house here in Italy, or actually I didn't build the house, it was designed and built for me, they geo-referenced the utility points and they obviously mapped it for me, of which I have, but actually I only had access to a paper copy, of which I took the graphs off and actually have the digital copy, and I actually have it now in 3 dimension. I don't live in it anymore, so it's not much value to me, but I can assure you it's relatively straightforward. Now, I know a house is small compared to a hospital, but data is available. And if it's important to a museum or a hospital, or even a private house for your reasoning, so long as you've got the architectural drawing, in fact, if you haven't, getting a drawing done is not actually that difficult. Actually going around with a tape measure is not that difficult. Okay, that's a bit more complicated. But it's relatively straightforward to get the data, personal data that you want for your indoor building. And the most important thing is in Italy, unlike the UK, they geo-reference the utilities first, got a stake in the ground saying that's where you live, then they plot the house on, they put the house on top of it. Whereas in the UK, they build the house and then they somehow try to fix the pipes and electricity into the building.
You always do things in the wrong way. You try the wrong side of the road. Use the wrong socket.
I'm using the typical stereotype that Italy is brilliant and the UK is not.
Sort of agreeing, sort of disagreeing with Martin, and you're drawing the points of me. I think there is still a challenge applied to the data. You know, our example, I work in an old building as well, and we have architectural drawings, and we thought, oh great, you know, we've got the drawings, but then you pull out the drawings and you discover that these were drawings that were made in I don't know when. They weren't updated when rooms have been divided and new bits put in. So there is still a challenge there, I think, that we can't, you know, while I'm saying it's possible, it's probably in many cases easier just, as you say, to effectively resurvey the building as it is now. But there's still a challenge, and it comes back to what the lady here said, that there has to be an impetus to do that. If there isn't a clear impetus, then why is an organisation going to spend all this money? And there's also a sort of fitness for use issue that an architectural drawing is produced for a particular purpose, and that's not necessarily the same purpose we're using it for. And while John, I'm sure, would argue that we should have one model and that's consistently useful for everything in the real world, but unfortunately that doesn't always happen.
Can I just follow up? It's a similar issue, but it's just really taking it to the next step. In that, I just wonder, the more that I'm listening to the discussion, the more it seems that there's an aspiration that we'll have data for everything, and so that I can navigate around the hospital and so on. But you know what? If I'm a terrorist and I want to know where to plant my bomb, then what I need is the architectural drawings of that thing, because then I know where the power plant is, where the gas pipes come in, and so on. And there is this assumption, I think, in what we're saying, that we're going to have to have all this data and make it available willy-nilly to everybody so that we can allocate ourselves. But there has to be some kind of concept of control of what the data that I am willing to share as a citizen, but also the data that our hospital is willing to share in terms of its private spaces.
There's much more of this, I guess. How much would you introduce as data provided by people assessing the environment? So do you think this will be part of the story? So we are not seeing what is behind the wall, but you're seeing what is actually used in the hospital. And for instance, you have cleaning services covering most of the environment most of the day. I'm saying in 3 years when we can have the sensors placed on people that are affected. And by the way, don't we think that we will have people providing this data anyway? So they will play with that by using the 3D cameras like they're doing.
I think this is, in a sense, the big picture. I know I helped drive down this big map concept, but I don't think that is actually the way forward. I think the way forward is whatever the local benefit is, or whatever the benefits commercialism is. For example, if I have a patient who suffers with dementia and they're in the hospital and I want to monitor them, I don't need the whole hospital to be mapped. I want a certain part of the hospital to be mapped for a specific reason. And looking at the indoor LBS button there, I can actually move my map around the place. I don't actually have to have a drawing. I don't have to have everything done necessarily. So it depends on the what is it, you said, the benefit. It depends whether the benefit to a hospital is to have the whole thing done, or the benefit is for a specific cause for patients so they don't have to wait 96 in the queue or something, or if it's for, say, a patient with dementia. Sorry to pick on that one, but that's the example that Anne used with me yesterday. And so I think that we have to be careful that we're not trying to map the world here. Well, we are, but I mean, in reality, what we're trying to do is provide a service of indoor location.
Someone called Google at the beginning said, we're mapping it. Yeah, that was another question.
Actually, I thought it was trilogies.
Yeah, I think Martin's onto something there, and yesterday we were talking about how thick the client should be as the server.
Thick down or thick
And the issue here is if you have that sort of data that you don't want to let out to everybody, you have a very thin client.
Yeah.
And the service is done up there.
Yeah, exactly.
And you control that.
Yeah, it's a very thin line that we are walking on. Scott, your point of view on this?
Well, I think Cameron pulled up again. I mean, there's a degree of you're layering data, and what, for example, if you want to know where the electrical installation is, where the electrical control systems are, that's privileged information because it's only of value to certain people, and you don't want everyone to know where that is or know how to access it. So if you have restricted access to resources, you have to protect that. And when you're if you're a building manager, you do have little signs in the door that say only authorised personnel, well that has to move into the data world as well, into the digital world, so you can maintain that kind of concept. Things like, the example Martin's saying, it's well very well to know where the dementia ward is. It's not appropriate to know who's on the dementia ward for the majority of people. The nurse might need to know, the doctor might need to know, but your insurance company should know. It's highly privileged information. So we have to take this is a very complex set of data models, where we're laying data on top of data and top of data, and we need to be careful that access to one layer of data doesn't suddenly open up privileged information. So this is something we can't do willy-nilly, and we've seen far too many willy-nilly approaches where people have used protocols which work in one context, apply it to another context, not realising how they can be abused. And I think we need to step back and look at a whole bunch of use cases, both for normal use and how people abuse these cases. Because, as Cameron points out, a terrorist, if he's going to take out a hospital with only one pack of C4, he has to see their architectural plans. He has to have some architectural knowledge and some engineering knowledge. But if you actually look the amount of explosives it takes to knock down a building, it's tiny. You can take out a building this size probably with about a kilo of C4. But if you're just doing a brute force attack, you probably need several tons of C4. So we need to try and make sure we understand how people could use and abuse data before we find an appropriate data model. And that's not really trivial.
Okay. Now, there are several sociological implications. I would like to know the point of view of Giovanna, which comes from that background.
Yeah, I was trying to connect some of the inputs raised the morning. And yes, I have a social research background, and I address some space and society related issues. And was thinking that something very interesting here is that we have to keep in mind that people always with their everyday life practices reframe spaces, both indoor and outdoor. And so even if we have a plan, both maybe of a hospital or spaces or other places, the function and the geographic delimitation of the space is always reframed by the practices of people. And when I'm thinking about people, there are different communities, as we saw in the case of the hospital, but also here in the place where I'm working here in Trentino Sviluppo. For instance, I can tell you that yes, there is here a very clear exit and entrance place where you can have access to this place. But for us that we are inside the building and we work here for several years, we know that there are some shortcuts to reach other places, and so we don't care about the map, we don't care about the map, but we have our own way of reaching places, of reaching colleagues. And so I think that we have to keep in mind those things, because if we want to do and make an iLocate device, we also have to keep in mind the movements and the way the people not only perceive but recreate spaces with their practices. So
But you're nodding.
Yeah, it's like in IKEA. Right? They have these little shortcuts. It's true.
I think that's a very important point, and it's introducing a very important difference in town planning. I mean, she was remembering us everyday practice and the relation between space and place. I don't know if we can have now the technology to really address this, the way that people are really not recreating every day the same space. But I think that that's definitely a point that we have to address.
And from the technical point of view, sorry for stepping and then you get back to this, I think we'll also have to consider also the representation, because the concept of space also relates to the way you look at the information that comes from. And technically speaking, changing the representation of all the data according to the concept of space you get from the place where you are can be a non-trivial issue in terms of, let's say, technology. Sorry.
Well, I want to go back even to the discussion we started in the second part. And I don't know why I was remembering a book I had in my bag. It's a map of 1748, Giambattista Nolli representing Rome. And you see that the white part is the public space and the black part is the private space. But many of the white parts are churches, indoor spaces. I think that's a very interesting map for Idlegate. That this would be the domain of Idlegate. I mean, to understand at the same level indoor space and outdoor public space. I mean, they and this representation can be very useful. This is the continuity we should look for. I mean, to understand that some buildings are really public space, like a square. If we can succeed with our private partners to achieve this level of knowledge of the data, at that point we have a continuity that permit us to have the real operational domain of Idlegate. But this is a change of mind. I mean, these people in the 18th century, they had a great idea of public space. I mean, this is a church, this is indoor, and this is wide. You know, we have to define in our cities a lot of white spots indoor and connect them over with the public space that we already perceive as public space. So, contaminate in a way the practice we do outside with the moment that we are inside the building. That something is changing psychologically, but from operational point of view, we have to convince that that building indoor is like to be outside.
Robin.
Yeah, I think building on this in several ways, and Bart and I were discussing yesterday, the new standard from OGC that you're working on is for points of interest. And so many people navigate by points of interest. I mean, you've only got to look at Google and so on. The points of interest, rather than the geometry or how people use the information to navigate and so on. And that I think is something we mustn't forget. And it doesn't matter whether it's just an additional layer of information. So you're saying your navigation is going to say turn left, turn right, go straight ahead. Where? At the church or at the outpatient clinic or whatever it is.
To that point on public space and the map, so it is a very interesting map. I introduced the aspect of temporal. Public spaces might not always be public space. Only between 8 and 6, and it is public space. You know, maybe it'll close down and the doors will the church. I know my local church closes at 8. So this is the temporal aspect.
Temporal aspect is very important as well. And this is an issue that, again, is on the top of the discussion about public space, temporal uses. This is now in one major investment, one program that the European Commission is on understanding how temporal uses of abandoned space, underused space, public space can help European cities to have new local economies to relaunch our cities. I mean, the same space has different uses 24 hours. But even if we take another temporal line, the evolution of space, I mean, we have many brownfields in our city. I mean, for many years they were places of production, and now we have to invent a new cycle. And that's in something connected to temporary uses. Again, it's a bug of town planning, but a big opportunity for new economy.
Yeah, one thing that I would like to step back a little bit, the concept of giving direction. We are used to say turn right after the church and not walk 452 meters and then turn right. We will have similar problems in the indoor domain. Get to the eastward, and then once you get to that part of the building, then go to the second level, and then again walk in. And that's a different story if you are a nurse, because if you're a nurse, you know the hospital by heart. So it's enough to say it's at the optician's office. So again, this problem won't be treated. I mean, from the data point of view, we have it all. It's just a problem of finding the right way of communicating with the user, and this will be a big challenge if we want the technology to become usable.
Perfect. To follow that up. You know, this is meant to be a brainstorm, and I have to say my brain is now becoming seriously stormed to try this thing. Because, you know, what we're now talking about, we're talking about identifying maybe indoor public space. We're putting a temporal map on it. We're saying that perhaps one of the things we're going to be using is a guidance system that will take you. We're then also having to put a differential access to the data. So the access to me as a citizen is going to be different to Anne as a nurse, or you know, the head administrator or the electrician or whatever. And all of this is then going to be managed in creating the data. And you know, my brain just isn't big enough to cope with the data and the data management that potentially we're talking about here. Now, I guess this is what iLocate is about, is to try and model how we do that. But you know, this is big data we're talking about, and it's going to have big repercussions, because it's not going to be as simple as, you know, the municipality of Bolzano saying, right, here are 20 data sets, and we are going to publish them. Take it or leave it, basically. You know, we're going to have to be a hell of an ability for me as a citizen to interact, to get the information I need to navigate around that hospital. Where am I going? When am I going? You know, all that. So it's just how we then move this forward, given the scale of the data we're talking about.
Actually, we are challenging this a little bit further, because the idea that we have, and perhaps Daniele can comment on it, is that we also use users as provider of information. It's the usual crowdsourcing approach, but the idea is that if you step by the lift and this is broken, then you report this, then the routing algorithm should not let you use that lift, but should route you through the staircases, for instance, unless you're a wheelchair user, and then you need another lift. So it becomes even more complicated. Yeah, perhaps you want to comment on it.
But basically, let me say, we're talking about two different types of data. One is kind of static data. When you're talking about a map, something which doesn't change for a long time. And then we are talking about situations that can happen, like the lift broken, which is just kind of a temporary data, which should of course be part of the same database, be part of the same model that we mentioned before. And when we look at the users, they also play a twofold role. One is about providing information, which is the, what we call it, standard crowd sensing approach. And personally, I see a lot of limitations with it. Where I think human intelligence can really play a big role is in terms of data curation and interpretation of data. So it's kind of a sensor reports that the lift is not moving, okay? And for me, I know that the lift is not moving, and I know something is broken. But then I have one person who goes there, tries to use it, doesn't respond, so it reports, but this event, this low-level event, means high-level semantic that the lift is broken. Or maybe they see that people there is a kind of a crowd of people in the middle of a corridor, okay? This I see because I can track location. Now, what does it mean? There is an accident, there is a fight, there is a queue. This is not something that the technology itself can tell me. This is where I need the human ability to interpret phenomena happening in the real world, because this is something which then will be used by applications to provide their service to the same users that are basically running this interpretation.
But not necessarily human beings. For instance, one thing that we are doing now is developing a system that locates cars within a parking lot, and then traces if that car has been there for how long, based on computer vision. Then if the car is there and it stays there for 2 days, and this is a shopping mall, that's not good. Either that car is broken down or there is a problem there. So it's not, and the system can detect it. And again, it can provide that bit of information to the relevant operator, and then probably someone will go and check. So I agree, this problem, if we step higher on the semantic scale, we were discussing also this with John. The problem is that the higher you go, the more elaborate it becomes, but the more added value you have. The challenge is to try and climb up that ladder, if you know what I mean. Martin?
No, I wasn't going to say anything like that. Accessibility, except what was being said. Some of you were with me in JRC, the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, and we were on the top floor, and the lift broke, and I was inside the lift. The lift door was open. So, first of all, it was in Italy, so I was challenged by language. And then secondly, when I rang through to speak to the engineer, he couldn't quite cope with the fact that there's a staircase, walk down the staircase. So it took a while before it could be communicated, but I don't think this is an accessibility issue. This is not a location issue. The only location issue is I didn't understand why I had to work out what lift I was in what building, in what part of JRC, why they didn't actually know where I was. And that was the important bit. So it didn't matter whether I was in a wheelchair or not, it mattered where was I. And I think, it comes back to data curation, I think, rather than data management.
I would say that it's not just data curation, but it's more kind of sense making. So it's kind of making sense out of the data. I mean, data curation is certainly important. For example, a sensor reports something and I want somebody to kind of validate that this is actually a situation happening. But it's also trying to really get the knowledge out of the low-level data that they can get through sensors, through some technological infrastructure.
Just, I'd like to know your point of view, because that's also part of your expertise, this inferring intelligence out of play of different information.
So I was mentioning before the potential for having regular owning exploiting the internal services of an organization. I think it would be responsible. And in the scientific world, I think we have been working to accelerate the introduction of this kind of data for specific parameters. My experience not very, say, vertical applications. But I would say, is it possible that if you have something in mind, it would be working faster and more accurate?
Bob, you want to comment on something?
I was thinking.
That's what.
And that was my expression. Something like I mentioned crowdsourcing before, and that is data coming from an occasional observer that you want to verify with reference data. And in the area that we're thinking right now, do we have also this aspect of reference space? Is there such a thing as reference space? And then, I don't know, it's a thing.
What do you mean? Sorry?
A reference space. So as a group, as an individual, as a sensor, with location, do we want to verify that against reference space to see if we are inside something or
Nav textbook onto the road.
Yeah, exactly, because they have that reference data being the road that has been surveyed before. So do we have that concept for indoor navigation as well as a reference space?
I'm not sure.
No, I'm just
thinking. And the problem is that indoor spaces tend to change more frequently than outdoor spaces do. I mean, you don't build a road every other day, but you might want to change the inside layout of a shop every other month. So there is also this issue of temporal evolution.
But then there's the building in which you make that should be the reference.
The reference, yeah.
I don't know if now first impression about that seems to be very interesting. Reference space, but when you design a building, when you design a neighborhood, a part of the city, not all the spaces you design have the same grade of accessibility. This could be very important, for example, when you enter a building, a hospital, maybe there are places where you cannot make public, you cannot make. And this could be a way that maybe the system would recognize what kind of spaces you are crossing in there. It's a real public one where everyone can stay. It's a transitional one. It's maybe this could be the use of
And here we have a gentleman from the cadastre of the province of Trento, so that could be also considered as a reference data. Then you have data, but then you have the problem of accuracy, precision. It becomes a
authoritative data.
Yeah. it's certainly authoritative, as authoritative as you can be. Cameron.
I think that again. So I sound as if I'm being incredibly negative about all of this, and I'm not really. I'm just thinking aloud, and it's about this data curation again, because we live in a world where we think that people are all honest and truthful and are doing things with the best possible motive. But I know people that would be quite happy to be in the hospital and to text lifts out of order, to crowdsource that data and cause the most utter chaos, because the hospital, the algorithm then reroutes them, everybody up the stairs.
Get on with it.
So very strange people. But this is a bit about the data curation. Who is entitled to crowdsource? What is the data validation and all this? So again, sorry, it sounds negative, but I think we do have to face up to some of these issues.
Yeah, but there is this issue of credibility. I mean, I think Daniela is the expert here in the room, as far as I know, in terms of depending on who you are, you become more credible or not, depending on the.
I mean, the point here is that we are talking about something which is really a social technical system. It's not just about technology. And we need to understand people in terms of individuals and collectives if we want to design a system that works. I think this is actually one of the big conceptual steps that we should undertake here. Moving from a pure technology-centric approach to something which integrates also psychological and social aspects into the design process. Because otherwise we will have different solutions that just doesn't work what we expect to do.
That comes to what Catherine says, identifying what the people need in order to make them entering the project, the process. And he's saying that in a museum I am watched as a thief or as a visitor. How do you refer to me? I'm looking at a Van Gogh and you are telling me it's a 20 million value painting. I'm the art lover, or I'm the thief that can take the painting and run away?
We cannot ask you, right?
Well, if I'm from security, my function in the museum is security, you're a potential thief.
But you are using the same infrastructure and the same system in order to maintain security and in order to give me, as an art lover, the information I need. And the question is, what's the good of the system? Why should I come in as a user? How do I refer to the use case? Are we asking the benefiters in the beginning, or are we thinking only as the private companies that are willing to put a product on the market in order to make money? In what phases are we involving people? In what phases are we seeing the people as contributors, as different actors? How do we define the value, the added value?
Yeah, I feel that we are stepping into the philosophical realm, as we say, and it becomes difficult to provide an answer. Okay, I think we have to close it because it's 12:15 and we are supposed to free the room at some point. So I'm afraid I have to cut this. It could go on forever. It has been very pleasant for me. I hope it has been as pleasant for you. I would like to thank you who has contributed to this. First of all, Trentino's group for hosting us. The speakers, Cameron, Bart, Clandestine, who's not supposed to be sitting here. Thank you, Cesare. Thank you again, Pietro. Thank you, Bruce and John. Thank you all. I would like to thank the iLocate partners who have joined the meeting. Hopefully now we are getting a project kick-started in the afternoon. I would like to thank the staff at Tributis who has been doing a lot of job behind me. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody else who has joined the event. Thank you, and that's it.